Has the time come? Geekers, the Superman movie is already in theaters, and surely these days there will be a whole conversation about this film all over the geekosphere. Or at least that's what I suppose. I'm recording this video a few weeks early since I watched the entire movie during my trip to Rio de Janeiro for the fan event. I already know you, and from what I've seen, there's a conversation forming around it, including some controversial decisions we'll discuss now. I've already uploaded my first reactions video, recorded right after watching the movie. In this video, I want to analyze what happens in the movie and how closely it matches the comics, with interviews I did with James Gunn, David Corenswet, and Rachel Brosnahan in Brazil. It's worth mentioning that there won't be any spoilers from the movie in the entire first part of the video, so don't worry. And then I'll let you know because there will be some light spoilers coming up, nothing that affects the plot, but I'll warn you so you can decide if you want to keep watching the video or not. And if that's the case, remember to come back later. My name is Go the Geek Monitor.
Go the Geek Monitor.
Before getting into the more controversial parts of the movie, I want to talk first about the three pillars: Superman, Lois Lane, and Lex Luthor. I mostly enjoyed the film because of these three characters, as the cast was well chosen and I really liked it overall. But let's get into the details, let's get specific. Starting with Superman, I don't know about you, but I had the idea that we would see a much more classic Superman, even similar to what we saw with Christopher Reeve. Which honestly I didn't really like because I feel that each Superman belongs to a different era. Little bit, but I was pleasantly surprised by David's Superman, because he does maintain a classic approach in terms of values and in how he represents hope and kindness experience. But he's also unlike any previous version. This new Superman is more human and emotional than past adaptations. And this completely sets him apart from other versions like Henry Cavill's and even Christopher Reeve's. Let me explain. By expressing his emotions more, he departs from the colder, more contemplative style of Man of Steel. By being a Superman who makes more mistakes and has emotional outbursts. Does he move away from the perfect figure Christopher Reeve represented like we saw in one of the trailers? However, he remains Superman, as he consistently shows a real desire to save the world, protect loved ones, and be a force for good in a difficult world. A characteristic that all Supermen share, regardless of how perfect, powerful, or emotional they are. Overall, throughout the movie, I truly felt David was Superman, giving off a vibe of great power and kindness. That's different from Gunn's usual writing. I actually asked him how he adjusted his style for Superman.
La verdad es que a lo largo de mi vida, a medida que he envejecido, creo que he cambiado. Creo que me preocupa menos protegerme a mí mismo. Creo que me preocupa menos ocultar el hecho de que soy sensible o ocultar el hecho de que amo a las personas. And so I just allowed that part of myself to be the part that wrote the screenplay.
And that's another very important point of the movie, that it really does feel completely like a Superman seen through the eyes of James Gunn. Someone who has a very particular style of directing and a very distinctive voice in his stories. If you've seen the movie, comment if you liked Gunn's style for Superman. It's also worth noting that his Clark Kent differs from previous film versions. He's neither the clumsy, cartoonish Clark from Reeve nor the charming, confident one from Cavill. Children. Rather, this is a Clark who is genuinely socially awkward, but without becoming a caricature. He's like that typical person who feels comfortable with a group of friends he knows, and that's when his true personality comes out. And actually, he has to pretend when he has to be Superman. Just like we saw in the interview scene, there are many interpretations of how Clark should be Clark. Personally, I prefer this interpretation because Clark is the real person and Superman is the character. And for that reason, sometimes this character breaks and we can get a glimpse of Clark beneath the facade. Superman takes a similar approach as seen in Smallville, Superman and Lois, and My Adventures with Superman. In fact, another marketing token that I loved is this playlist that James Gunn developed for Clark Kent and other characters. Because I feel like it really humanized Clark like rarely before. He seems like a real person with specific musical tastes who, as Gunn says, believes he listens to tough music, but it's not as tough as he thinks. All of this builds a very specific image of Superman for the movie. Who is Superman?
Él es casi tan bueno como una persona puede ser. Quiero decir, es perfecto. He's not someone who will always stand up for those who need protecting. He'll always save a life whenever it's humanly possible or, unhumanly possible. In this case,
to me, it's just a guy walking down the street in a Superman t-shirt, just a shirt, nothing more. But everybody knows what the S emblem stands for, what it means. It means something simple and pure that brings us together.
Next, we have Lois Lane, who is presented here as an extremely capable reporter who is always thinking about the bigger picture and the consequences of Superman's actions. I like this point, as she sometimes even seems to oppose Superman. In fact, I saw that several people were asking on social media why Lois Lane is so tough on Superman, especially in scenes like this interview. What we see here is a more modern interpretation of Lois Lane. Because unlike the old comics, where she was a reporter madly in love with Superman and very friendly with him, she's someone who is able to question him, precisely because of the affection and appreciation she has for him. Interestingly, she admires Clark's kind way of viewing the world. However, she is also frustrated by his excessive trust in humanity. She even worries it might accidentally become dangerous by...
I think she thinks he's capable of sometimes doing more harm than good. But I think, as you said, I think she knows that his intentions are pure. And in questioning him, she's only trying to get him to think a few more steps ahead.
There are a couple of details about Lois that I also want to talk about, but we'll get to that point with spoilers. Spoilers. What these questions do is help Superman become a better hero, especially when he has to face Lex Luthor. Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor combines classic and modern traits. Watch him. He's still a technological genius, as always. He's also a white-collar criminal who manipulates global politics for personal gain, just as in modern versions. Contrary to popular belief, Lex wasn't always a millionaire, as that version of the character only appeared in comics in the mid-years. Similarly, he hates Superman just for existing, as in recent comics and adaptations where the Man of Steel makes him feel inferior. But he also has clumsy helpers who makes things harder for him. He has comedic traits and a real estate interest like the Jim Hackman version. I love that his first scene immediately shows him as a real threat. A cruel, selfish character incapable of empathy even toward those close to him, whose intelligence makes him a formidable rival. Reality? But what surprised me the most is that this Lex, unlike any other, is very aware of his own emotions since he knows exactly why he hates Superman. And why does he commit evil acts without this awareness making him stop or become less dangerous? Actually, knowing why he does evil but still doing it makes him even more evil. Before discussing the other characters, I want to address the film's tone, which, as I mentioned, is very different from previous Superman movies. The trailers feature kaijus, mutant babies, and caped dogs, offering a fresh take compared to previous versions. Viewers impressed by the visuals might think this is somewhat exaggerated. This originates from a specific comic era. Gunn has stated his Superman film draws science fiction elements from the Silver Age of comics. What does he mean by this? He's talking about a time in comics from 1945 to 1970 when characters like Superman were criticized as being too violent for kids. Writers began creating stories that were less political and more focused on science fiction. For example, Superman shifted from fighting controversial politicians to facing Jimmy Olsen as a giant turtle or looking after Susie, Lois Lane's mischievous niece. These comics have a very unique charm. Character? I love them. Not only did Superman often rely on his wits over strength to solve problems, but the absurd premises that stretched your imagination also showed great creativity. It was also the era that greatly expanded the Man of Steel's mythology through characters like Brainiac and the Kents, Krypto, Supergirl, and Metallo.
I think from the beginning, James was really interested in exploring all the aspects of the Superman character that have existed in the comics. James was drawing on the fantastical worlds depicted in the comics. It's cool to see that on the big screen for the first time.
This approach is based on the comics, but it's also quite different from what we've seen. I'm curious how the general audience, especially those who don't read comics or this era, feel about this decision. Especially because the plot really feels like the Silver Age, in the sense that some elements just appear without giving us much context, just like it happened in those comics. Similarly, many situations are quickly resolved. This movie includes more political and social elements than the Silver Age comics. With all this Barabia stuff, I would have added another half hour to the movie. Do you think we could get a Goncut release? I mean, if we already got the Snyder Cut. Gon said he included the so-called Justice Gang in the movie because of the Silver Age approach. Because he liked reading those stories, where Superman clearly belonged to a world full of superheroes, where he constantly interacted with them. I personally also feel that the inclusion of this theme has to do with the fact that James Gunn enjoys writing these ensembles of characters. He has shown he can do it well, so I think Gunn played to his strengths in this movie. Some feared that the many characters would overshadow Superman. Honestly, I don't think that was the case, but if I'm being honest, even though I enjoyed these characters and each one of them, those, especially Mr. Terrific, who is fun to watch on screen, I wish they were Superman's support team. I mean, characters like Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen, who would have had to solve the situations that come up and who also solve some problems. Yes, for me personally, I really think I would have liked it more if it had been a movie 100% focused on Superman and his cast. We should also note that Krypto is as adorable as expected from the trailers and will surely be popular with audiences. From here on, we'll discuss the movie with some light spoilers. I won't discuss key plot points since my video editor hasn't seen it and I don't want to spoil it for her. I'll discuss a few elements not shown in the trailers. Since seeing the movie, I knew the reinterpretation of Clark's parents would be one of the most controversial points. Also the Krypto, and if you've seen the Superman movie, you probably noticed the Kents are portrayed differently than usual. They are portrayed as simple people with a small farm who struggle with technology due to their age, which differs from other adaptations, and since the Kents have never been shown as wealthy. Many versions suggest they live simply, almost in poverty, and that's how they're portrayed here. Interestingly, Snyder used this approach in Batman and Superman, where Martha worked in a restaurant. Gunn explained he wanted to reflect an experience closer to his own.
The main thing I wanted to do was to deal with his adoptive parents in a way that was reflective of what I really believe are more people from the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest, and he's more reflective of the farmers that I grew up around.
On the other hand, there's a much more controversial change in Jor-El and Lara, which by now everyone is probably discussing. If you've seen the movie, you know what it is. To me, it seemed very risky. Especially because it's something that strays from what we've seen in almost all the adaptations and because it gave us a very different approach to Kryptonian civilization. Without exaggerating, I think this is the equivalent of that controversial scene in Man of Steel, where Jonathan Kent hesitates about whether Clark should have saved the kids on the bus or not. No, it's a scene that personally as a dad I liked and made a lot of sense to me. But well, since it's been the center of an online conversation for 12 years, I guess it'll be the scene we'll keep discussing for the next 12 years. However, I dare to think that for the Supergirl movie, another film that will surely also address topics about Kryptonian civilization, will they make a small correction to this or clarify what we saw in this Superman movie? If you saw the movie, share your thoughts on this change in the comments. Other changes likely to spark debate include this portrayal of Jimmy Olsen as a ladies' man. We've seen that since the advertising, but it really affects the plot and how a change happens. Surprised? Decisions that truly seem like James Gunn being himself? That makes sense, since he's the head of the Detective Comics universe and likely had full freedom to tell the story he wanted. And well, we'll have to see how the audience reacts to a different Superman, since we're used to seeing him in a much more solemn or contemplative way. Even Christopher Reeve's Superman always radiated perfection in every scene. Having a Superman like David's creates a unique experience. The fandom will stay divided since it's nearly impossible to make a movie that unites everyone, as each person connects with different interpretations of the character. But personally, I'm very curious to know how the general public will receive the movie. It's something much more hopeful and classic than what we're used to seeing in superhero movies. But at the same time, it manages to take different paths and present us with the Man of Steel for a new generation. There's also a risk involved. Most importantly, I think the movie sends a unique, very punk message. Trust humanity like Superman? The question is, can this Superman still amaze modern audiences? Personally, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens. Don't leave yet. If you've seen the movie, share your thoughts and if you found the topic interesting in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel because this month there's a lot of content about Superman coming both in movies and comics, and your subscription helps me a lot. That's all for today. I'm Go the Geek Monitor, and keep looking beyond the obvious.